Hey guys, Michelle here with the result call at Crossfit Hyde Park. So something that we've been getting constant questions about, mostly from trainers and other coaches, and even the coaches that we bring in as interns, is how do you make sure all of your participants of a group program qualify for the movements that you're doing, right? We press, we deadlift, we squat, we combine those movements into bigger complexes. In order for that person to do those with loads, there's an actual process to make sure that they qualify, all right? So the way that we do that is we do a simple 3-tier pyramid. So in this pyramid, we have the foundation, which is functional movement, and the functional movements comprise of 5 different components. Number 1, a squat. Number 2, a hinge. 3 pull, 4 push, and 5 carry. In order for me to assess these movements, I do use something called the functional movement screen, but essentially every coach has the eye to make sure that we can do all these patterns. Squatting, of course we know what a squat is. With a hinge pattern, we're looking at the movements like a deadlift, a kettlebell swing, all the movements that require the hip flexion and extension. Pulling and pushing, and of course carrying objects. You first have to create a way to assess these movements, and then you have to decide, is this person qualifying to do these patterns under speed, under load, and with all sorts of variations. Okay, so once we've decided that this person qualifies to do all of these movements with other variables, we can then move on to the next piece of the puzzle, which is performance. Okay, so functional movement, number 1. Number 2, performance. All I mean by performance is your general fitness techniques. And there's again 5 different components here for performance. Number 1, add load, so they can squat really well. We can go ahead and load them up. Maybe start them in a goblet load, but then change the load to back load or front rep load. And we can vary the loads in order and making sure that they can do them properly. If they can't hinge well, you may not add the load, right? You're going to keep them back down in the functional movement category, which means, all right, I've got someone that can squat great. They passed this bottom tier. Now we're going to move on and we're going to load them up in the squat. But they can't hinge well. So what I'm going to have them do is work more on their hip mobility. So then they can eventually hinge better. They've got that proper hip movement, and then we can go ahead and move them up to the performance tier. All right, other than load, what is there? There's also locomotion. All right, locomotion is simple. It's just me taking a stationary movement when I first teach somebody and adding the coordination to make it dynamic, covering a distance. Okay, so challenge them with that. Number 3, plane of motion. So plane of motion, of course, means not just in the sagittal plane, but moving sideways in that frontal plane or with rotation in the transverse plane. Very important in order to make sure you have variety in your program. It also keeps people out of injuries. All right, number 4, unilateral. So unilateral, very, very good for our population. We're bipedalists. We move opposite leg and opposite hip and shoulder. So essentially, we're really moving one leg at a time. It's very important to train that way. Don't always do bilateral movements. So we have someone that squats well. We can go ahead and throw in a single leg squat, in whatever capacity they're able to do it properly. And my last one is tempo. So tempo meaning I can slow down a movement, control the eccentric, isometric, concentric, or I can speed it up, jump squats, simple things like plyometrics. All of these challenge the performance component, and most of us live within these 2 ranges of the pyramid. The last one at the top is specialization, aka a specific skill. A really good example of this would be a tennis player. So a tennis player constantly doing the same motions, going back and forth, needing agility. If I have a client that's a tennis player, we're going to be covering these prerequisites and making sure we have functional movement performance. But we're also going to work on specific things to their specialization, which is rotational power, deceleration, agility. So we're going to throw these things in as well, as long as that is, of course, their goal. So that's how we come up with a program. So for coaches, of course, getting that first baseline assessment process, when you get a first a newcomer coming into your program, do you have a way to assess them? That's really, really important. That we're really, really big on. From there, after you have established a way to get the baseline, then you just educate your participants. You give them some things to work on so they can build those patterns up. And the ones that they do well at, then you have them in your wheelhouse. You can get them to do it heavier. You can get them to do it faster. All right, so that's just a little sneak peek into how CrossFit Hyde Park operates. If you guys have any questions, and reach out to us through the result call comments or even message us. We'd love to answer all of your questions. All right.